This session is going to be some Torah teaching, and we're working on vows. A vow includes promises, covenants, oaths, contracts. Basically, anytime you say that you're going to do something in the future, it comes under vows. And breaking a vow is a sin. So let's get into the commands. We have a lot of scripture to read, so I'm just going to read through it as quickly as I possibly can. The commands. In Deuteronomy 23, verses 21 through 23, it says, "When you shall vow a vow unto Yahweh your Elohim, your God, you shall not slack or delay to pay it, for Yahweh your God will surely require it of you, and it would be a sin in you. But if you shall forbear or cease to vow, it shall be no sin in you." In other words, it's not a sin to not vow. That which is gone out of your lips, you shall keep or guard and perform or do. Even a free will offering, according as you have vowed unto Yahweh your God, which you have promised with your mouth. Okay? This is reiterated in Numbers 30, verse 2. If a man vow a vow unto Yahweh, or swear an oath to bind his soul upon a bond, he shall not break it. He shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Now, this swearing an oath to bind his soul upon a bond, that's talking about a contract in business primarily. And the word break his word, the word there actually means to pierce or to wound his word. In other words, he's wounding his reputation by not following through with his vow. Okay, so what do we learn out of these commands? First of all, we're supposed to keep our vows to God. Secondly, do not delay to pay a vow. Third, it is okay to not vow. However, there are some exceptions to that. There are some vows that we have to take for various reasons, and we'll get to that here shortly. A vow, number 4, a vow includes anything spoken with your mouth saying you're going to do something, right? And that's what we see. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. So if he says he's going to do something, he has to do it. And not doing it is breaking a vow. The binding, number 5, the binding is the thing that you promise to do if you cannot fulfill your vow, the consequence. In other words, when you make a contract in business, you say you're going to do certain things, and if you don't, you have to pay a certain amount of money, or whatever the consequences are. You have it right there in the document. When they do a marriage contract in Jewish tradition, it's called a ketubah, and in the ketubah you have what happens if you divorce, because the marriage contract is a vow. That's your marriage vow, and that happens, of course, prior to actually doing the marriage ceremony and consummating it, usually a year ahead of time. And so you make that vow at the time of what is called betrothal. And and that vow is that you're going to marry this woman, and if you break that vow, in other words, you get divorced, then this is the consequences. This is what you have to pay to the woman, and it's all spelled out in the ketubah so that you don't have to go through all that mess. When you get divorced, it's already settled because it's a part of the vow. The vow includes what happens if you break the vow. If you don't include the binding in the vow, then you have a real problem because there's no way that you can break it, right? Without sin. But if you have a consequence written into the vow, then it becomes it's still a sin, but it's it is written into the contract that is what the alternative is, and so it makes it legal in that sense. Okay, Numbers 30, most of the chapter is talking about women making vows. I'll read a little bit of it here, starting in verse 3. If a woman also vow a vow unto Yahuwah and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and her bond wherewith she has bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she has bound her soul shall stand. But if her father disallow her in the day that he hears it, not any of her vows or of her bonds wherewith she has bound her soul shall stand, and Yahuwah shall forgive her, because her father disallowed her. In other words, the woman is, in legal terms, property either of the father or of the husband, and it goes on to talk about the same thing as it works with the husband if she's married. But if she's not married, then she has the legal right to make vows, and she has to keep the vows. But because of the fact that she is not in a legal position to make vows, she comes under either the father or the husband, depending on which case it is. And in that case, the father or the husband can disallow the vow. Now, because the husband or the father did not make the vow, then he is not breaking his own vow, and therefore it is not a sin. And the woman, because of the fact that she is not legally bound to keep vows, because she is the property of the father or the husband, she's not sinning either, because she has no control over somebody else telling her that she can't make that vow. But when you're under the Torah, you make a contract with a woman, you have to recognize that if it's not ratified with the husband or the father, then it's no good. And so it's done with that understanding, and that's why it doesn't involve sin. All right, continuing on. Don't make unnecessary oaths which open you unnecessarily to sin. In other words, if you don't make the oath, then you're not going to sin. But if you make the oath, if you say you're going to do something, and then something happens to where you don't do it, then you have sinned. And if you hadn't said that you were going to do it in the first place, it wouldn't have been a sin. Okay, so Matthew 5:33 through 37. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. So you don't want to, you want to say, yes, I am intending to do that, okay? But I'm not going to promise that I'm going to do that, is the thing that's going on here. James 4:13 through 16. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So we don't have the power to fulfill our vows. That's the biggest problem right there. Things are out of our control that happen, and so we don't. And that's why we want to avoid making vows if at all possible. But this is mentioning the business type of vow. Required covenants. So there are certain things that we have to vow. So let's go through those. First of all, to follow Yeshua, we have to vow that. If we either have to vow to follow him and make it into heaven, if we fulfill that vow and do follow him, in other words, versus not making that vow and going to hell, or making that vow and not fulfilling it and then going to hell. You know, either one of those is the same thing. Genesis 28:20 through 21. And Yaakov vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this path that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall Yahuwah be my God. So that's an example of the vow that we have to take with God. Psalm 22:26 through 27. My praise shall be of you in the great congregation. I will pay my vows before them that fear him. The meek shall eat and be satisfied. They shall praise Yahuwah. So what vow is this talking about? It's talking about the vow to follow God. Psalm 66:13 through 14. I will go into your house with burnt offerings. I will pay you my vows, which my lips have uttered and my mouth has spoken when I was in trouble. Now, this is talking primarily about the vow to follow God. Usually we get to the end of our rope, and that's when we decide that we're going to follow God. But a lot of times we have all kinds of problems, and we say, we're going to, do what you want us to do if you'll get us out of the problem that we're in, right? Psalm 76:10 through 12. Surely the wrath of man shall praise you. The remainder of wrath shall you restrain. Vow and pay unto Yahuwah your God. Let all that be round about him bring presents unto him that ought to be feared. He shall cut off the spirit of princes. He is terrible to the kings of the land. So we are a king in the sense that we do our own thing. We make our own decisions. And that's the way we are as an unbeliever. But eventually we get to a place where things are really bad. And then we have a choice. We can vow to follow God or not. And, you know, obviously if we don't, we're going to go to hell. If we do vow, then we can go ahead and follow him and make it into heaven. Nahum 1:15, behold on the mountains the feet of him who brings good tidings, or the gospel, who proclaims peace. O Judah, keep your appointed feast, perform your vows, for the wicked one shall no more pass through you. He is utterly cut off. So our vow is to follow God, right? Well, that means doing the Torah. And so that's why it says appointed feast. He requires us to go meet with him 3 times a year. And so that's part of our vow, if we're living in the land, obviously. Okay, I'm going to stop here and finish up with a second video because of our time situation.